Captain Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel Endeavour, watching the stars through the main viewing screen. His ship had been traveling through the outer rim for 3 months, mapping new worlds and searching for signs of intelligent life. The crew was tired but excited. Today felt different somehow. Lieutenant Emma Stone looked up from her science station. Her blonde hair was tied back in a neat ponytail, and her blue eyes showed the curiosity that made her the best xenobiologist in the fleet. "Captain, I am picking up something strange on the long-range scanners," she said. "It looks like a massive ship heading straight for us." Marcus walked over to her station. The readings showed something huge moving through space at incredible speed. Whatever it was 3 times larger than their own ship. "How long until it reaches us?" Marcus asked. Emma checked her instruments again. "About 20 minutes, sir. And Captain, the energy signatures are unlike anything we have ever seen before." Commander Jake Foster stepped forward from his position at the tactical station. Jake was a tall man with dark hair and serious brown eyes. He had served in the military for 15 years and knew trouble when he saw it. "Should we change course, Captain?" Jake asked. "We could jump to hyperspace and avoid contact entirely." Marcus thought for a moment. The smart thing would be to run. They were alone out here, far from any human colonies or military support. But running away would not help humanity learn about the galaxy around them. "No," Marcus said firmly. "We came out here to make contact with alien life. If this is our chance, we should take it." Jake nodded but kept his hand near the weapons controls. "I will keep our defenses ready, just in case." The massive alien ship appeared on their viewing screen 15 minutes later. It was unlike anything humans had ever built. The hull was dark and curved, almost organic-looking. Strange energy patterns flowed across its surface like lightning. The ship looked dangerous and beautiful at the same time. "It is hailing us," said Communications Officer Lisa Chen from her station. Lisa was young but skilled, and her voice stayed calm even though her hands were shaking slightly. "Put them on screen," Marcus ordered. The viewing screen changed to show the inside of the alien ship. What appeared before them made several crew members gasp in surprise. The alien was enormous, standing at least 12 feet tall. Its body was covered in dark scales that seemed to absorb light. 2 large eyes glowed with an inner fire, and when it opened its mouth to speak, they could see rows of sharp teeth. The creature's voice was deep and powerful, like thunder rolling across mountains. When it spoke, the words appeared in their minds rather than through their ears. "Small creatures of the void," the alien said. "You travel in our territory without permission. I am Warlord Vorthok of the Drakari Empire. Your species is unknown to us. State your purpose or be destroyed." Several crew members stepped backward from the screen. Even through the display, they could feel the raw power radiating from this being. This was clearly a predator, something that had never known fear. Marcus stepped forward, keeping his voice steady and calm. "I am Captain Marcus Webb of the human vessel Endeavour. We are explorers from Earth, seeking to learn about the galaxy and meet new forms of life. We mean no harm to you or your empire." Warlord Vorthok tilted his massive head, studying Marcus with those glowing eyes. The alien seemed surprised by something, though it was hard to read expressions on such a foreign face. "Humans," Vorthok repeated the word slowly. "This name is not in our records. In 3,000 years of conquest, we have encountered over 400 species. All have either fled in terror or attacked us in desperation. Yet you do neither. Why do you not fear us, small human?" Emma watched the exchange with growing fascination. She had studied animal behavior for years, and something about the warlord's body language caught her attention. Despite his threatening words and fearsome appearance, there were subtle signs of tension in his posture. This was a being who expected certain reactions and was not getting them. "We fear what might harm us," Marcus replied honestly. "But we also know that fear alone solves nothing. If you wish to destroy us, you already would have. The fact that you are talking suggests you might be curious about us as well." For the first time, something that might have been amusement flickered in Vorthok's eyes. "Curious? Yes, that is an accurate word. Your ship carries primitive weapons that could not scratch our hull. Your technology is centuries behind ours, yet you face us without cowering. This is interesting. Jake moved closer to Marcus, ready to act if needed. He had seen dangerous predators before, both animal and human. The warlord was definitely both intelligent and deadly. But there was something else there, something Jake could not quite identify. "Tell us about your empire," Marcus said. "What are the Drakari?" Warlord Vorthak straightened to his full height, and when he spoke, there was pride in his mental voice. "We are the apex predators of this region of space. For 3 millennia, we have ruled over hundreds of worlds. Lesser species serve us or are removed. We are the strongest, the most intelligent, the most feared beings in known space." "That sounds like a heavy responsibility," Emma said quietly. The comment seemed to catch Vorthak off guard. He stared at her for a long moment before responding. Responsibility. Another interesting word choice. Most species speak of our power in terms of tyranny or oppression. You see it as a burden. "Power always comes with responsibility," Marcus added. "The stronger you are, the more you must decide how to use that strength. Do you protect the weak or exploit them? Do you create or destroy? These are the questions that define any species." Vorthak was quiet for several seconds, his glowing eyes never leaving the human captain. When he finally spoke, his mental voice was softer, more thoughtful. "Your species thinks in ways we have not encountered before. This conversation is more interesting than most wars we have fought. Perhaps we should meet in person, if you have the courage, that is." Marcus looked around at his crew. Jake gave him a small nod, indicating he was ready for whatever happened. Emma was practically vibrating with excitement at the chance to study these aliens up close. Lisa and the others looked nervous but determined. "We accept your invitation," Marcus said. "When and where would you like to meet?" "Now," Vorthak replied. "Prepare your docking bay. I will come aboard your vessel with a small honor guard. Let us see what makes humans so different from every other species we have conquered." The screen went dark, leaving the bridge crew in stunned silence. They had just invited aboard beings who could probably tear their ship apart with their bare hands. But somehow, Marcus felt they had made the right choice. "Emma, prepare the main docking bay," he ordered. "Jake, have security teams ready, but keep weapons lowered unless I give a direct order. Lisa, record everything. This is going to be the most important first contact in human history." As the crew prepared for their visitors, none of them realized that this meeting would change not just their own lives, but the fate of the entire galaxy. The apex predators of space were about to meet the one species that would teach them something they had never learned before. They were about to learn what it meant to trust. 3 weeks had passed since Warlord Vorthak first stepped aboard the Endeavor. The meeting had gone better than anyone expected. The massive Drakari leader and 2 of his warriors had spent hours talking with the human crew. What should have been a tense first contact had become something like a cultural exchange. Dr. Rachel Morgan stood in the archaeology lab, studying images from a dead world they had discovered 2 days ago. Rachel was a small woman with red hair and green eyes, but her mind was sharp as any blade. She had spent her life uncovering the secrets of ancient civilizations. The planet below them was lifeless now, but the ruins scattered across its surface told a different story. Massive stone structures covered in strange writing suggested this world had once been home to an advanced civilization. What interested Rachel most was that some of the symbols matched patterns she had seen in Drakari art. "Captain Webb to Dr. Morgan," came Marcus's voice over the comm system. "Please report to the main conference room. Warlord Vorthak wants to discuss your findings." Rachel gathered her data tablets and headed to the conference room. She found Marcus, Emma, and Jake already seated at the large table. Warlord Vorthak sat across from them in a specially reinforced chair. Even sitting down, he towered over the humans. "Dr. Morgan," Vorthak said in his deep, mental voice, "Captain Webb tells me you have found something interesting on the dead world below us." Rachel activated the main display screen. Images of the ancient ruins appeared, showing massive temples and carved stone walls covered in symbols. "These structures are at least 5,000 years old," Rachel explained. But what makes them special is this writing. Some of these symbols are similar to Drakari script, but others are completely unknown. Vorthak leaned forward, his glowing eyes studying the images carefully. For the first time since meeting him, Rachel saw something like worry cross his face. "Show me the unknown symbols," he commanded. Rachel changed the display to focus on a series of dark markings carved deep into black stone. The symbols seemed to absorb light, making them difficult to look at directly. Vorthak's reaction was immediate and alarming. The massive alien stood up so quickly his chair nearly toppled backward. His scales darkened and a low growling sound filled the room. "Where did you find these markings?" he demanded. "In the deepest part of the main temple complex," Rachel replied, surprised by his strong reaction. "Warlord Vorthak, what do those symbols mean?" The Drakari leader was quiet for a long moment, his large hands gripping the edge of the table. When he finally spoke, his mental voice was heavy with ancient fear. "They are warnings, markers left by those who came before us. These symbols speak of the Void Spawn, the enemy that has haunted the galaxy for millions of years." Emma looked up from her notes. "We have never heard of any species called Void Spawn. What are they?" Vorthak turned his burning gaze toward her. "They are not a species as you understand it. They are hunger given form, darkness that consumes light and life. They come from the spaces between stars, feeding on entire worlds until nothing remains but empty void." Jake shifted in his chair, his military training making him alert to any threat. "Are they still active? Do they pose a current danger?" "They sleep for centuries at a time," Vorthak explained. "When they wake, they sweep across the galaxy like a plague. The last time they stirred was over 1,000 years ago. We fought them to a standstill, but at great cost. Entire Drakari fleets were lost. Dozens of worlds were consumed." Marcus leaned forward. "But you defeated them?" Vorthak's laugh was bitter and cold. "We did not defeat them. We survived them. There is a difference, Captain Webb. The Void Spawn adapt to every strategy we use against them. They learn from each battle and become stronger. We hold them back through sheer force and determination, but each encounter costs us more than the last." Rachel studied the symbols again, trying to understand their meaning. "These warnings, they suggest the Void Spawn were active on this world, but the planet died thousands of years ago." "Yes," Vorthak said grimly. "And now you know what happens. When the Void Spawn finish feeding, they leave behind nothing but dead rock and empty space." Engineer Tom Bradley chose that moment to enter the conference room. Tom was a big man with calloused hands and an easy smile, but his face was serious as he approached the group. "Sorry to interrupt, Captain," Tom said, "but I have been analyzing the energy readings from the planet's core. You need to see this." Tom activated his datapad and sent the readings to the main display. Complex energy patterns filled the screen, showing deep underground activity. "The planet's core is not completely dead," Tom explained. "There are strange energy signatures coming from deep underground. The patterns are unlike anything in our databases." Vorthak studied the readings and his scales went completely black. "They are stirring. After 1,000 years of sleep, the Void Spawn are beginning to wake." A chill filled the room as the implications sank in. Emma was the first to speak. "How long do we have?" "If these readings are accurate, perhaps months, maybe a year at most," Vorthak replied. "When they fully awaken, they will spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every world in their path will be consumed." Jake looked at the tactical implications. "What kind of numbers are we talking about? How many ships do they have?" "You think in terms of ships and fleets," Vorthak said. "The Void Spawn do not build vessels as we understand them. They are the vessels. Individual creatures the size of your largest battleships. Swarms that can darken entire star systems. They move through space like living storms." Tom studied his engineering data more carefully. "Wait a minute. These energy signatures, they follow patterns I recognize. Our human technology might interact with them differently than Drakari tech does." Vorthak turned his full attention to Tom. "Explain." "Well, Drakari technology seems based on direct force and energy manipulation," Tom said, thinking out loud. Human tech works on different principles. We use adaptation, creativity, redundancy. We build things that can change and respond rather than just overpower. You think your primitive technology could succeed where ours has failed? There was no insult in Vorthak's voice, only curiosity. Marcus stood up, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Maybe the question is not whether our technology is better or worse. Maybe the question is whether our approach is different enough to surprise them. Rachel had been studying the ancient symbols while listening to the conversation. Suddenly she gasped and pointed at the display. "Look at this," she said excitedly. "These symbols here, they do not just warn about the void spawn. They talk about something else, an alliance. Different species working together." She traced her finger along a series of carved images. "This shows Drakari fighting alongside other races. Species I do not recognize, but they are clearly working as a team." Vorthak studied the images with growing interest. Impossible. The Drakari have never fought as equals alongside lesser species. Maybe they were not lesser, Emma suggested, quietly. Maybe they were just different, each one bringing something unique to the fight. The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. For thousands of years, the Drakari had faced the void spawn alone, using their superior strength and determination. But the ancient carvings suggested a different approach had once been tried. Marcus looked around the table at his crew and their unexpected alien ally. "Warlord Vorthak, you said the void spawn adapt to your tactics because they have fought you for so long, but they have never fought humans before." Vorthak's eyes blazed brighter as he understood what Marcus was suggesting. "You would stand with us against an enemy that has consumed entire star systems?" "We would," Marcus replied without hesitation. "But not as your subjects or servants, as your partners." For the first time since meeting him, Warlord Vorthak smiled. It was a terrifying sight, all teeth and fire, but there was genuine warmth behind it. "Then perhaps," he said slowly, "the ancient alliance can rise again. And perhaps this time we might do more than just survive." The void spawn were awakening after 1,000 years of sleep. But for the first time in galactic history they would face something they had never encountered before. The unpredictable creativity of humanity combined with the unstoppable strength of the Drakari. The real test was about to begin. The alarm bells rang through the Endeavor at 3 a.m, ship time. Captain Marcus Webb rushed to the bridge, still pulling on his uniform jacket. The red emergency lights cast everything in an ominous glow. Commander Jake Foster was already at his station, his face grim as he studied the tactical displays. "Captain, we are receiving a distress call from the Drakari colony world of Corveth Prime. They are under attack." Marcus took his position in the captain's chair. "What kind of attack?" "Unknown hostiles, sir. But the energy signatures match what we found on that dead world 3 weeks ago." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The void spawn had awakened, and they were already striking at inhabited worlds. Lieutenant Emma Stone looked up from her science station, her face pale but determined. "Captain, I am reading massive energy distortions around Corveth Prime. Whatever is happening there, it is big." The main viewing screen activated, showing Warlord Vorthak's image. The massive Drakari looked older somehow, as if the weight of his worst fears coming true had aged him in hours. "Captain Webb." Vorthak's mental voice was heavy with urgency. "The scout forces of the void spawn have found Corveth Prime. My people are fighting, but we cannot hold them for long. The main colony holds over 2 million Drakari civilians." Marcus did not hesitate. "We will help. How long until we can reach the system?" "Your small fleet could arrive in 6 hours, Vorthak replied. "But Captain, you do not understand what you are offering to face. These creatures are not like anything your species has ever encountered." "Then it is time we learned," Marcus said firmly. "Jake, signal the other ships in our exploration group. Tell them we are going to assist our allies." Jake activated the communications array. Within minutes, 3 other human vessels had confirmed they would follow the Endeavor into battle. It was not much of a fleet, but it was what they had. Commander Lisa Parker commanded the second largest ship, the Discovery. Lisa was a tough woman with short black hair and steel gray eyes. She had served in several border conflicts and knew how to fight when diplomacy failed. Marcus, Lisa's voice came over the comm. My tactical officer is telling me we are about to face an enemy that eats star systems for breakfast. Please tell me you have a plan. We adapt and we improvise, Marcus replied. It is what humans do best. 6 hours later, the small human fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Corvith Prime. What they saw made even the experienced officers gasp in horror. The planet was surrounded by creatures that defied description. They looked like living shadows given form, each one the size of a battleship. Dark tentacles stretched out from their bodies, reaching toward the planet's surface like grasping fingers. Where the tentacles touched the ground, everything simply disappeared, leaving behind patches of absolute nothingness. Lieutenant Colonel David Chen stood in the Endeavor's shuttle bay, checking his combat gear. David was a career soldier with 20 years of experience, but even he had never seen anything like this. His job was to lead the ground evacuation teams if they could get through the orbital battle. Sergeant Mike Torres, Corporal Amy Walsh, are your squads ready? David asked. Mike Torres was a big man with steady hands and a calm voice that kept his soldiers focused under pressure. Ready as we can be for fighting nightmares, sir. Amy Walsh nodded from where she was checking her equipment. Amy was small but tough, the kind of soldier who never gave up no matter how bad things got. Our job is to get civilians out, right, sir? We can do that. On the bridge, Marcus watched as Drakari warships engaged the void spawn creatures. The alien predators fought with incredible skill and courage, their energy weapons carving through the darkness. But for every void spawn they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. Lisa, take your ship and the transport vessels around to the planet's far side, Marcus ordered over the comm. Start evacuating civilians. Jake, prepare our weapons systems. Captain, Emma called out, I'm detecting something strange. The void spawn seemed to be reacting to the Drakari ships differently than they did in the historical records. Marcus moved to her station. What do you mean? The ancient battle data showed the void spawn adapting slowly to Drakari tactics over multiple engagements. But these creatures are already countering moves the Drakari have not used yet. It is like they remember every battle from 1,000 years ago. Tom Bradley looked up from his engineering station. Captain, what if that is exactly what is happening? What if these things have some kind of collective memory? The implications hit Marcus immediately. If the void spawn remembered every Drakari tactic from their previous wars, then traditional battle strategies would fail from the start. Jake, change our approach vectors. Do not follow standard fleet formations. I want every ship moving unpredictably. Sir? Jake questioned. If these things have never fought humans before, then they cannot predict what we will do. Make us as chaotic and unpredictable as possible. The human ships broke formation and began attacking in patterns that made no tactical sense by traditional standards. The Discovery made sudden turns that should have been impossible. 2 smaller ships flew directly at enemy forces, then split, apart at the last second, to attack from completely different angles. The effect was immediate. The void spawn, which had been smoothly countering every Drakari move, suddenly seemed confused. Their attacks became less coordinated, their movements uncertain. Warlord Vorthak's voice came over the communications channel. Captain Webb, what are your ships doing? Your tactics make no sense. Exactly, Marcus replied. Emma, are you reading any changes in the enemy behavior? Emma studied her instruments with growing excitement. Yes, Captain. Their reaction patterns are becoming erratic. They keep trying to predict our next moves, but they cannot find a pattern to follow. On the planet's surface, David Chen led his evacuation teams through the Drakari capital city. The buildings were massive, built for creatures twice the size of humans, but David's soldiers adapted quickly. Torres, take your squad to the residential district. Walsh, head for the educational centers. Focus on the young and elderly first. The evacuation should have been impossible. Humans trying to carry Drakari civilians who weighed 3 times as much as they did. But somehow the soldiers made it work. They used human ingenuity, building improvised stretchers and calling in shuttles to pick up groups from rooftops. What surprised everyone, including the Drakari, was how the human soldiers reacted to the civilians. Instead of seeing them as alien predators, the humans saw families in need of help, children scared and separated from parents, elderly Drakari too weak to flee on their own. Amy Walsh found herself carrying a young Drakari who could not have been more than a few years old by their standards. The child was terrified, but Amy spoke to him in soft, calming tones even though he could not understand her words. "It is okay, little guy," she whispered. "We are going to get you somewhere safe." The child's psychic abilities were not yet developed, enough for full communication, but he could sense Amy's emotions. Instead of the predatory aggression he expected from warrior species, he felt something he had never experienced before. Pure, protective love. In orbit, the battle was turning. The void spawn were still dangerous, but their confusion was growing. They had evolved to fight predictable predator species that followed logical tactical patterns. Human behavior made no logical sense to them. Marcus watched as one of the shadow creatures tried to anticipate the Discovery's next move. The creature positioned itself perfectly to counter Lisa's expected attack pattern. Instead, Lisa had her ship perform a maneuver that violated several laws of physics and attacked from below. "All human ships, focus fire on the lead creature," Marcus ordered. "Hit it with everything we have." The combined firepower of 4 human vessels struck the largest void spawn simultaneously. The creature writhed in what might have been pain or surprise before suddenly dissolving back into the darkness of space. But the real breakthrough came from the planet's surface. David Chen was leading a group of Drakari civilians toward an evacuation point when they were surrounded by smaller void spawn creatures that had reached the ground. The shadow beings approached, expecting to feed on the fear and aggression of cornered predators. Instead, they encountered something that broke their fundamental programming. The human soldiers were not fighting like predators defending territory. They were fighting like parents protecting children. Their thoughts radiated not aggression, but pure defensive love for beings they had just met. The void spawn creatures stopped advancing, their forms wavering uncertainly. They had no response programmed for this kind of emotional signature. Mike Torres stepped forward, placing himself between the creatures and a group of Drakari youngsters. His rifle was ready, but his mind was focused entirely on keeping the civilians safe. "Come on then," he said quietly. "You want to hurt them? You go through me first." The void spawn creature nearest to him suddenly recoiled as if struck. The pure protective instinct radiating from Torres was like poison to a being that fed on predatory emotions. One by one, the shadow creatures began to retreat, unable to process or consume the strange new emotions they were encountering. In orbit, Warlord Vorthak watched the impossible happen. For the first time in galactic history, void spawn forces were retreating not because they were defeated, but because they were confused. "Captain Webb," Vorthak's mental voice was filled with something like awe. "What are your people doing down there?" Marcus smiled as he watched the evacuation reports coming in. Thousands of Drakari civilians were being successfully evacuated by human soldiers who saw them not as alien predators, but as people who needed help. "What we do best," Marcus replied. "We are taking care of each other." The battle for Corveth Prime was won, but more importantly, it proved something that would change the course of the war. The void spawn could be confused, could be made to retreat by something they had never encountered in millions of years of existence. They had never faced a species that fought from love instead of aggression, and they had no idea how to handle it. 2 months after the battle at Corveth Prime, the relationship between humans and Drakari had changed in ways no one expected. Dr. Rachel Morgan stood in the ancient library on the Drakari homeworld, surrounded by stone tablets and crystal data cores that held the history of an empire spanning 3,000 years. Working beside her was Korthex, a Drakari scholar warrior whose scales were marked with the blue patterns that showed his dedication to learning as well as fighting. Korthex was smaller than Warlord Vorthak, standing only 10 feet tall, but his mind was sharp as any weapon. "Dr. Morgan," Korthex said in his careful mental voice, "these records speak of something we had forgotten. Before the Drakari became conquerors, we were part of something larger." Rachel looked up from the ancient tablet she was translating. The writing was difficult, but she was beginning to understand the old language. "What do you mean?" Korthex activated a crystal data core, and holographic images filled the air around them. The images showed different alien species working together, their ships flying in mixed formations, their soldiers fighting side by side. Long ago, the galaxy was protected by an alliance called the Guardians of Light. Each species contributed something different. The Drakari provided strength. Others provided wisdom, speed, healing, or technology. Together, they kept the void spawn contained. Rachel studied the images with growing excitement. What happened to this alliance? Pride, Cortex replied sadly. As the Drakari grew stronger, we began to believe we no longer needed the others. We thought our power alone could protect the galaxy. When the alliance fell apart, the other species hid or fled to distant stars. The Drakari stood alone against the darkness. The implications were clear. The ancient alliance had succeeded in containing the void spawn for thousands of years. Only when the Drakari tried to face the enemy alone did the battles become desperate struggles for survival. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Endeavor, Captain Marcus Webb was meeting with Ambassador Jennifer Ross, who had arrived from Earth to help establish formal relations with the Drakari Empire. Jennifer was a skilled diplomat with gray hair and kind eyes, but she was struggling to understand what was happening. Captain Webb, Jennifer said, my instructions from Earth are to negotiate a standard trade and defense agreement. But what you are describing sounds like something much more significant. Marcus nodded. Ambassador, we are not just talking about an alliance of convenience. The Drakari are asking us to become partners in protecting the entire galaxy. Equal partners. Admiral Robert Price, who had arrived with Jennifer's diplomatic mission, shook his head in disbelief. Robert was an old soldier with decades of command experience, but even he was struggling with the scale of what was being proposed. Marcus, these beings have conquered hundreds of worlds. They have never treated any species as equals. Why would they start with us? Before Marcus could answer, Warlord Vorthak entered the bridge. The massive Drakari had to duck to fit through the doorway, but his movements were careful and respectful. In the months since first contact, he had learned to move gently around the smaller humans. Admiral Price, Vorthak said, may I answer your question? Robert looked up at the towering alien, trying to hide his nervousness. Please do. For 3,000 years, the Drakari have ruled through strength alone. We conquered because we were stronger, faster, more intelligent than those we encountered. We believed this made us superior. Vorthak moved to the viewing screen, which showed the peaceful scene of human and Drakari ships working together in space. Then we met humans, he continued. You are not stronger than us. Your technology is primitive compared to ours. By every measure we understood, you should have been easy to conquer or dismiss. But we did not react the way you expected, Jennifer said, beginning to understand. Exactly. Every other species we encountered responded with fear or aggression, emotions we understood and could use to control them. But humans responded with curiosity, compassion, and hope. You saw our strength and asked how you could help us use it wisely. Admiral Price frowned. I still do not understand why that would make you want us as partners. Vorthak turned his burning gaze toward the Admiral. Because in 3,000 years of conquest, we never learned the most important lesson in the galaxy. Strength without wisdom is just destruction. Power without compassion is just tyranny. You showed us something we had forgotten how to see. Meanwhile, in the engineering sections of both fleets, an even more remarkable collaboration was taking place. Tom Bradley worked alongside Cortex's brother, a Drakari engineer named Vorthex. Despite the language barrier, the two had developed a working partnership that amazed everyone who watched them. Tom, Vorthex said through his translation device, your human approach to engineering is very different from ours. We build things to last forever and overpower any obstacle. You build things to adapt and change. Tom wiped his hands on a cloth, grinning at his alien partner. Different approaches, same goal. We both want to build things that work when people need them most. They were working on a hybrid technology that combined Drakari power systems with human adaptive programming. The result was something neither species could have created alone. Weapons and shields that could change their frequency and tactics in real time. But the real breakthrough was happening in the training centers. Young pilot Sarah Martinez had volunteered to train with Drakari warriors, learning their combat techniques while teaching them human tactics. Sarah was small, even by human standards, barely 5 feet tall with brown hair and quick green eyes. Standing next to Drakari warriors who towered over her, she looked like a child. But she had something they were eager to learn: the ability to think creatively under pressure. The key to human tactics, Sarah explained to a group of young Drakari pilots, is that we do not follow a plan. We follow principles. Be unpredictable. Protect each other. Adapt to whatever happens. One of the young Drakari, whose name translated roughly to Swift Claw, raised a massive hand. But how do you coordinate without a plan? How do you know what your allies will do? Sarah smiled. We trust each other to do the right thing, even if we cannot predict exactly what that will be. Watch. She demonstrated by having the Drakari pilots fly a simple formation exercise. But instead of giving them specific orders, she just told them to keep everyone safe and complete the mission. The results were chaotic at first, but gradually the Drakari began to understand. Instead of following rigid patterns, they started responding to what their teammates needed in real time. The formations became fluid, adaptive, alive. This is how you confuse the void spawn, Swift Claw said with sudden understanding. They could not predict your actions because you were not following predetermined patterns. Exactly, Sarah replied, and now you can do it too. The most significant change came from an unexpected source. Warlord Vorthak's youngest offspring, a Drakari named Kythera, had been severely injured in a void spawn attack on a border outpost. Drakari medicine could keep her alive, but could not heal the strange energy damage the creatures had inflicted. Dr. Angela White, the Endeavor's chief medical officer, had requested permission to try human medical techniques. Angela was a thoughtful woman with steady hands and a gentle manner that put even alien patients at ease. The damage is unlike anything we have seen before, Angela explained to Vorthak as they stood outside the medical bay. But human medicine works differently than yours. We focus on helping the body heal itself rather than imposing healing from outside. Vorthak looked through the window at his injured child. Kythera was barely conscious, her usually bright scales dimmed to a dull gray. Do what you can, Dr. White. If you can save her, the Drakari Empire will be forever in your debt. Angela worked for 18 hours straight, using a combination of human medical knowledge and careful study of Drakari biology. The key breakthrough came when she realized that the void spawn damage was not just physical. It was spiritual, attacking the life force itself. Human medicine had developed techniques for treating trauma that affected both body and spirit. Angela adapted these methods for Drakari physiology, focusing on helping Kythera's natural healing abilities overcome the spiritual poison left by the void spawn. Human medicine had developed techniques for treating trauma that affected both body and spirit. Angela adapted these methods for Drakari physiology, focusing on helping Kythera's natural healing abilities overcome the spiritual poison left by the void spawn. When Kythera opened her eyes and spoke her father's name, Warlord Vorthak did something unprecedented in Drakari history. The most powerful warrior in the galaxy knelt before a human doctor and offered her his personal protection for life. Dr. White, he said, his mental voice thick with emotion, you have given me back my child. From this day forward, any who threaten, you threaten me personally. The incident marked a turning point in human Drakari relations. Word spread throughout the Empire that humans had healed what Drakari medicine could not. More importantly, they had done it not for conquest or advantage, but simply because they saw a suffering child who needed help. As the weeks passed, more Drakari began to understand what their leaders had discovered. Humans were not just useful allies or interesting primitives. They were something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that grew stronger by lifting others up rather than pushing them down. The partnership was deepening into something more profound than anyone had imagined. It was becoming a transformation of both species, as the Drakari learned compassion from humanity, and humans learned the courage to use their gifts on a galactic scale. The void spawn were stirring again in the deep darkness between stars. But, for the first time since the ancient alliance fell, the galaxy was beginning to unite, and at the center of that unity was an unlikely partnership between the most fearsome predators in space and the species that taught them how to love. Major Kevin Thompson crouched in the ruins of an abandoned space station on the edge of known space, his reconnaissance equipment scanning the darkness beyond. Kevin was a career intelligence officer with sharp eyes and the patience to wait for hours to get the information he needed. What he was seeing now made his blood run cold. "Command, this is Thompson," he whispered into his comm device. "You need to see this data immediately." 6 months had passed since the healing of Cathera and the deepening partnership between humans and Drakari. The combined fleets had won several small victories against Void Spawn scout forces. But Kevin's intelligence gathering had revealed the terrible truth about what was coming. On the bridge of the Endeavor, now designated flagship of the joint human Drakari fleet, Admiral Marcus Webb studied the data Kevin had transmitted. The images showed a massive dark cloud moving through space toward the galactic core. But this was no ordinary cloud. "My God," breathed Communications Officer Lisa Chen as she enhanced the images. Lisa had been promoted after her excellent work coordinating the multicultural fleet communications. There must be millions of them. The cloud was composed entirely of void spawn creatures, each one the size of a battleship. They moved together like a living storm, consuming everything in their path and growing larger with each world they devoured. Warlord Vorthak stood beside Marcus, his usual confidence shaken by the scope of what they faced. "This is the final awakening. The full swarm united for the first time in 1,000 years. They mean to consume the galactic core and spread across all inhabited space." "How long until they reach the core worlds?" Marcus asked. 3 weeks, perhaps 4. Vorthak replied. "When they reach the center of the galaxy, they will have access to the most populated systems. Billions will die in the first wave alone." Marcus turned to address the assembled fleet commanders. Admiral Robert Price represented the human forces, while several Drakari war leaders spoke for their own fleets. The combined force was impressive, but it was nothing compared to what they were facing. "We are outnumbered 1,000 to 1, Marcus said calmly. "Traditional tactics will not work. We need to do something they will never expect." Admiral Price shook his head grimly. "Marcus, there is no strategy that can overcome those odds. Maybe we should focus on evacuation, save who we can." "No," said Commander Jake Foster firmly. Jake had become the strategic planning officer for the joint fleet, and he had been thinking about this problem for weeks. "Running will not work. They move faster than we can evacuate. If we do not stop them here, they will hunt down every refugee ship in the galaxy." Warlord Vorthak agreed. "Commander Foster speaks truth. The void spawn will not stop until they have consumed everything. We must make our stand now." Marcus walked to the main display screen, studying the tactical situation. An idea was forming in his mind, something so desperate it might actually work. "What if we do not try to defeat them militarily?" he said slowly. "What if we try to do something else entirely?" "Explain," Vorthak demanded. "The void spawn feed on fear and aggression. They have evolved to counter every military response. But what if we do not give them a military response? What if we give them something they cannot understand or consume?" Lisa Chen looked up from her communications station. "Admiral, I am receiving reports from across the galaxy. Every species with space travel capability is monitoring our fleet. They know this is the final battle." An idea sparked in Marcus's mind. "Lisa, can you establish a galaxy-wide communications network? Connect every inhabited world, every ship, every space station?" "It would take some time, but yes, sir. What do you have in mind?" Marcus turned to address the entire command staff. "We are going to do something unprecedented. We are going to show the galaxy what it means to hope." Commander Jake Foster began coordinating the battle plan while Dr. Rachel Morgan and Tom Bradley worked to activate the ancient defensive systems they had discovered in the ruins. The systems had been dormant for thousands of years, but the hybrid, human Drakari technology might be able to bring them back online. "Tom, The power requirements are enormous, Rachel said as they worked in the engineering sections. Even with our combined fleets, we do not have enough energy to activate the full network. Tom studied the ancient schematics, his mind working through the problem. What if we do not need to power it ourselves? What if we can get it to power itself? How? The network was designed to channel psychic energy. The void spawn consumed negative emotions, but what if we could fill the network with positive ones instead? Meanwhile, Sarah Martinez was leading a desperate mission to prepare the fleet for what Marcus was calling the Hope Gambit. Every pilot, human and Drakari alike, was being briefed on their role in the plan. This is not about winning a battle, Sarah explained to the mixed squadron of pilots gathered in the main hangar. This is about showing the galaxy that some things are worth fighting for no matter what the odds. Swiftclaw, the young Drakari pilot who had learned human tactics, raised his hand. But how do we fight hope? How do we make hope into a weapon? Sarah smiled. We do not fight hope. We become hope. We show everyone watching that when darkness comes, there are always those willing to stand against it. The plan was audacious, beyond belief. Instead of meeting the void spawn in traditional battle, the combined fleet would position itself directly in the path of the swarm. Then, using Lisa Chen's galaxy-wide communications network, they would broadcast their final stand to every inhabited world in the galaxy. But this would not be a desperate last battle. It would be a demonstration of everything that made life worth protecting. Humans and Drakari fighting together not from hatred of their enemy, but from love of what they were protecting. The key, Marcus explained to his senior staff, is that we cannot fake this. The emotions have to be real. Every person in this fleet has to genuinely believe that what we are doing matters, even if we die doing it. Dr. Angela White had volunteered to coordinate medical support for all species in the fleet. Admiral, we have families here, children who came with the civilian support vessels. Are you asking them to die for this plan? No, Marcus replied, firmly. I am asking them to live for it, to show the galaxy what we are all fighting to preserve. Warlord Vorthak had been quiet during the planning, but now he spoke up. Admiral Webb, my people have followed strength for 3,000 years. You are asking us to follow something much more difficult. What is that? Faith. Faith in something we cannot see or touch. Faith that doing the right thing matters, even when the odds are impossible. The day of the final confrontation arrived, with the massive void spawn swarm filling the space ahead of them. The combined human Drakari fleet took position directly in the path of the approaching darkness, their ships arranged not in battle formation, but in a pattern that spelled out a message in ancient galactic script. For all life. Lisa Chen activated the galaxy-wide communications network. Across countless worlds, billions of beings tuned in to watch what they expected to be the final defeat of the galaxy's defenders. Instead, they saw something unprecedented. The human and Drakari crews were not preparing for death. They were celebrating life. Engineers Tom Bradley and Vortex demonstrated their hybrid technologies, showing how two different species could create something beautiful together. Dr. Rachel Morgan shared the ancient stories they had discovered, tales of cooperation and hope from the dawn of galactic civilization. Pilot Sarah Martinez flew alongside Swiftclaw and the other mixed squadrons, their ships dancing through space in formations that looked more like art than warfare. The young Drakari who had learned human tactics was teaching other pilots how to fly with creativity instead of rigid discipline. But the most powerful moment came when Warlord Vorthak himself addressed the galaxy. I am Vorthak of the Drakari, his mental voice reached across the stars. For 3,000 years my people have ruled through fear. We thought strength alone could protect the galaxy. We were wrong. He gestured toward the human crew members, working alongside his warriors. These humans have taught us something we had forgotten. True strength is not the power to destroy. True strength is the wisdom to protect what is precious. As the void spawn swarm approached, something extraordinary happened. The ancient defensive network that Tom and Rachel had worked to restore began to activate, powered not by technology alone, but by the collective hope and determination radiating from the fleet. The creatures that had fed on fear and aggression for millions of years suddenly encountered something they had never experienced. Instead of the familiar psychic signature of predator species fighting for dominance, they found themselves facing something that broke their fundamental programming. They were facing love made manifest. The love of parents for children, of friends for each other, of protectors for those they shielded. The combined psychic energy of billions of beings across the galaxy, all focused on the single idea that life was worth preserving. The lead void spawn creatures slowed, then stopped, their forms wavering as they tried to process emotions they had no mechanism to understand or consume. For the first time in galactic history, the unstoppable swarm had met something that truly could not be conquered. The united will of all life in the galaxy, focused not on destroying an enemy but on protecting everything beautiful and precious in existence. The real battle was just beginning. The moment the void spawn swarm stopped advancing, the galaxy held its breath. Admiral Marcus Webb watched from the bridge of the Endeavor as the massive shadow creatures writhed in space, their forms flickering between solid matter and pure darkness. For millions of years, nothing had ever made them hesitate. Dr. Emma Stone monitored the psychic readings from her science station, her eyes wide with amazement. "Admiral, the energy patterns from the void spawn are completely chaotic. They are trying to feed on the emotions from our fleet, but they cannot process what they are encountering." The ancient defensive network that Dr. Rachel Morgan and Tom Bradley had restored was now fully active, powered by something no one had expected. The hope and determination radiating from billions of beings across the galaxy had created a psychic resonance that the network could channel and amplify. "The network is using our emotions as a power source," Tom reported from engineering. "But it is not just our fleet. Every world that is watching, every person who believes in what we are doing, is contributing to the field," Commander Jake Foster studied the tactical displays with growing wonder. "The void spawn are not just stopped, they are actually backing away from our position." For the first time in recorded galactic history, the unstoppable swarm was retreating. Not because they were defeated in battle, but because they had encountered something their evolution had never prepared them for. Warlord Vorthak stood beside Marcus, his glowing eyes fixed on the wavering enemy forces. "Admiral Webb, what you have accomplished here defies everything we know about warfare. How do you defeat an enemy by refusing to hate them?" Marcus smiled as he watched the ancient defensive systems spread their influence throughout the star system. "We did not defeat them, Vorthak. We confused them. They are designed to feed on predator emotions, fear, anger, aggression, but we gave them something else entirely." "What did we give them?" "Love," said Dr. Angela White from her position at the medical station. "Pure protective love, amplified by the hope of every thinking being in the galaxy." The communications officer, Lisa Chen, looked up from her station with tears in her eyes. "Admiral, I am receiving messages from across the galaxy. Species that have been hiding for centuries are coming out of isolation. They want to join what we have started here." On the main viewing screen, the lead void spawn creature was changing. Its dark form was becoming less solid, less defined. The shadow that had consumed countless worlds was dissolving, unable to maintain its structure when faced with emotions it could not understand or absorb. One by one, the other creatures in the swarm began to follow suit. They were not dying, exactly, but transforming. The darkness that had driven them for eons was being replaced by something else, a confused sort of peace, as if they were remembering something they had forgotten long ago. "My God," whispered Dr. Rachel Morgan as she studied the readings. "I think they are becoming something else entirely." The transformation spread through the entire swarm over the course of several hours. The shadow creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years were dissolving back into the cosmic energy from which they had originally formed. But instead of the hungry darkness they had been, that energy now carried traces of the hope and love that had touched them. Warlord. Vorthak received a communication from his homeworld that left him stunned. The Drakari High Council, the ruling body that had governed through strength alone for 3,000 years, was requesting an immediate meeting with Admiral Webb. They want to make a formal proposal, Vorthak explained. Something that has never been done in Drakari history. 3 days later, Admiral Marcus Webb stood in the great hall of the Drakari homeworld, surrounded by the most powerful predators in the galaxy. The High Council members were enormous even by Drakari standards, their scales marked with the honors of countless victories. But when the eldest council member spoke, his words were not what anyone expected. Admiral Webb, the ancient Drakari, said, "For 3,000 years the Drakari have ruled this region of space through conquest and domination. We believed this made us strong." The council member gestured toward the viewing screens that showed the aftermath of the battle. Where the void spawn swarm had been, there was now empty space filled with gentle, peaceful energy. "You have shown us a different kind of strength. The strength to transform enemies instead of destroying them. The strength to unite instead of conquering. We have never encountered anything like it." Marcus waited respectfully for the Drakari to continue. Therefore, the council member announced, "The Drakari Empire formally requests that humanity become the guardians of this galaxy, not as our conquerors but as our guides. We offer our strength in service of your wisdom." The proposal sent shockwaves through the assembled diplomats. Admiral Robert Price, who had come to represent Earth's government, looked stunned. "You are offering to place your entire empire under human authority?" Robert asked. "No," said Warlord Vorthak, stepping forward. "We are offering to place our strength under human guidance. There is a difference. We remain Drakari, but we choose to follow the path that humans have shown us." Marcus considered the proposal carefully. "I accept, but only under certain conditions. First, all species must be treated as equals. The days of conquest and domination are over. Second, every decision must be made by a council representing all the major species in the galaxy." "Agreed," the council members replied in unison. "And third," Marcus continued, "the Drakari must teach others what they have learned. Your strength must be used to protect the weak, not to rule over them." The establishment of the Guardian Council took place 6 months later on a neutral world chosen specifically for its beauty and peaceful nature. Representatives from hundreds of species attended, including many that had hidden from galactic civilization for millennia. The ceremony was simple but profound. Admiral Marcus Webb, now elderly with gray hair and kind eyes, formally accepted the role of First Guardian, while Warlord Vorthak took the position of Protector General. But the real test of the new alliance came in the years that followed. Dr. Emma Stone, now Director of Xenobiological Sciences, documented the transformation of galactic civilization as predator species learned to use their abilities to nurture rather than dominate. The former void spawn energy had spread throughout the galaxy, creating what scientists called harmony fields, regions of space where aggressive impulses were naturally dampened and cooperative behavior was enhanced. Wars became rare, and when conflicts did arise, they were resolved through negotiation rather than violence. Tom Bradley, now Chief of Hybrid Technologies, worked with engineers from dozens of species to create innovations that no single race could have developed alone. The combination of different approaches and perspectives led to advances in medicine, agriculture, and space travel that benefited everyone. Sarah Martinez established the first integrated pilot training academy, where young beings from different species learned to work together in ways their ancestors could never have imagined. Swift Claw became one of her first instructors, teaching courses in adaptive tactics and creative problem-solving. But perhaps the most significant change was in the Drakari themselves. The species that had once conquered through fear now became the galaxy's most devoted protectors. Their strength, guided by human wisdom and tempered by compassion, made them ideal guardians for smaller and more vulnerable species. Dr. Angela White opened the first multi-species medical center, where techniques from different civilizations were combined to create healing methods that seemed almost miraculous. The young Drakari Cathara, whose healing had sparked the deepening friendship between the species, became one of Angela's most dedicated students. The final scene of this transformation took place 20 years after the battle that changed everything. An elderly Admiral Webb walked through a peaceful colony where human children played alongside young Drakari in gardens tended by beings from a dozen different species. Dr. Emma Stone, now with silver hair but still curious eyes, was documenting the development of this new civilization. "Marcus," she said as they watched the children at play, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had run from that first encounter with Vorthak?" Marcus smiled as he watched a human child teaching a young Drakari how to grow flowers. "I think about it sometimes, but then I remember something important." "What is that?" "The best things in life happen when we choose hope over fear, cooperation over competition, love over power." The Drakari did not just learn to trust us, they learned to trust themselves to be better than they thought possible. A young Drakari approached them, her scales bright with health and happiness. It was Kithara, now grown to adulthood and serving as an ambassador between species. "Admiral Webb," she said in perfect human speech, "the Council has approved the expansion to the Andromeda Galaxy. 3 volunteer fleets have been assembled, human, Drakari, and mixed species crews." "Volunteers to do what?" Marcus asked. "To spread the Guardian philosophy to other galaxies," Kithara replied. "To show other civilizations that there is a better way than conquest and dominance." Marcus nodded approvingly. The galaxy had been transformed, but the work was far from over. There were other regions of space where fear and aggression still ruled, where predator species had never learned the lessons the Drakari had discovered. As the 3 of them watched the sunset over the peaceful colony, Marcus reflected on how much had changed. The most fearsome predators in the galaxy had become its most devoted protectors, not through conquest or coercion, but through the simple act of showing them a better way to live. The Drakari had entrusted everything to humanity, not because humans were stronger or more advanced, but because they had demonstrated something rarer and more valuable than any technology or weapon. They had shown that true strength comes not from the power to destroy, but from the wisdom to preserve and protect. And in learning to trust humanity, the Drakari had discovered something even more important. They had learned to trust in the possibility that even the darkest hearts could be transformed by hope, and that even the most fearsome predators could become the galaxy's greatest guardians. The age of conquest was over. The age of protection had begun. And at its heart was the simple truth that had changed everything. When beings choose to fight from love instead of fear, they become capable of things that seemed impossible. The galaxy was safe, not because its guardians were the strongest, but because they had learned to care for each other, and that made all the difference.